Hi, Eric here, and today I'm getting the Jeep ready for winter. I'm going to be spending the winter this year in either North Conway, New Hampshire or Ouray, Colorado, which are both pretty cold places. So I just want to make sure the Jeep is comfortable for myself. At this point in time, I have around like 600 to 700 nights spent in the Jeep, and usually after like 2 to 3 months of full time in it, it gets kind of hard. So I know this season I'm probably gonna be doing like at least 4 months full time in the winter time. So I want to make sure it's really dialed. Just going off of the history, I've kind of started to like resent the Jeep after a little bit of time, even though it's cool. It's just so little and so uncomfortable that it needs to be dialed. So today, some of the things I'm going to be doing is installing a heating system, better dialing in my electrical, and then just preserving the wood because it is starting to show its age and it needs to be preserved a little bit better. So for the heat, I got the seat out because that's where the heater's going, is underneath the driver's seat. And it's a pretty cool unit. Here it is. It's this Webasto. So I'm going to be mounting it here on the floor, and I need to weld up a bracket for it because the floorboards are ribbed, so it doesn't really give you a flat surface. And this is kind of when it's like the fun creative part of installing these things, is you have to think about like how to do it in an odd space because there's no instructions on how to install a heater into a Jeep Wrangler for a camper. So I need to weld up a flat piece of steel or whatever, and then put a ring around it so that I could pass through the floor. And that'll be today's project, as well as getting my electrical system dialed. I've had this Yeti 400 here, and I've just charged it as I drive and through a little solar panel, but I want to hard wire it into the ignition on circuit of the Jeep. So I got this inverter here, and I'm going to wire that into the ignition on, which is basically when the Jeep is on and running and driving, this will charge to goal zero for me. And that is what I'll use to charge camera batteries, my phone, the lights in here, and then also that heater. So. And for the electrical setup, there's just a few things I want to do. I have this wall sconce over here and some twinkle lights, which serve as like the main lights for the Jeep. But I want to hard wire in a switch for it. I usually just tap this right here, and then the light turns on, which totally works. But I have to kind of unplug these right here anytime I want to alter like what's on for the AC circuit, and then as well as wire in this lantern back here. I use this when I'm like racking up and I have all my gear out, and I've since trimmed back the wires because it was kind of a pain to unplug and plug in that little socket all the time. So I want to hardwire everything in and then put switches for the different circuits. And I think it'll just make the Jeep a little bit easier to use, as opposed to kind of like frustrating. You have to always like plug stuff in all the time. And but for the heater, back to the heater install, all these projects keep like walking around and getting like, my mind's all disoriented by these things going on. But this is the gas tank, and I got my pickup for it. So I have this mounted in a way where it's around like 3 inches from the bottom of the tank. So when the heater pulls all the fuel it can and it depletes everything, there's still a little bit of fuel for the Jeep to be able to get back to a filling station. So that's the heater install. And for the door, it was starting to get like furry on me. It was just breaking down pretty significantly. So I'm gonna sand it, prep it, and then paint it with a varnish so that hopefully the Jeep can last for many years and not just turn into a rotted pile of wood hanging off the back of a Jeep Wrangler. So those are today's projects, and hopefully I can get all these things done before it gets too cold and go skiing. So yeah, so this is the metal I'm going to be using for the tart for the heater mount. It's actually the roof vent for the trolley, so pretty funny. I'll cut this up, weld it, and get that heater in. I'll have the the fill, or the the pickup tube for the heater here. It's already installed. It's got a nice gasket on it, and I got to get this gas tank back up there. Unfortunately, all the gas tank straps broke when I took it out, so I'm gonna have to go run over to the dealership and get some more. This shouldn't be too expensive. There's kind of these little bands right here, but yeah, I'm thinking I'll get this in today and hopefully get some heat going. Yeah, so this is definitely on the list of reasons why my mom gets frustrated with me being at the house. Whoops. Okay, pretty simple, and I didn't really use like a cutting brake to make all these pieces, which would have made it like super pro level. I just used an angle grinder, but here we go. This is the plate, which is just a little bit bigger of this one. This is just cold drilled steel, so I can weld onto it. It's a little thicker gauge than the one. I think this one actually came from one of the Chinese diesel heaters. I don't believe this is from the Webasto kit. I have so many parts laying around here. But anyways, this is a little bit thicker, and this is just kind of like my sidewalls that I'll weld onto here. And what this allows me to do is put it below the floor level, even though it has those weird ribs, and then fill in the space with a sealant. So this is just basically a way to pass through the floor safely and to make sure that no fumes would ever come back up if there was ever an exhaust leak or something like that. So. So this is why it's really important to tack weld when you're building stuff like this, because if you ever need to alter anything like I do now, going in there and just tack welding it very strategically in the corners allows you to come in and cut everything and then alter it as needed. So for me, this piece right here is around an 1/8 inch too short. So all I need to do is come in here and pop this tack weld off. I can probably just do it with a pair of vice grips, and then I can make the alterations I need to, and then finish tack welding it. Once I know everything's good, I'll mock it up to the heater, then I can fully burn it all in. So, alright, cool, everything's looking good. I have it mounted on here, and now I can go and fully burn it all in. And I'll still have access to get to the clamps that are going to hold the intake and the exhaust on, as well as for the fuel. So having adequate room to get it all your connections, not making it too tight, but I also didn't want to make it too big because I don't have a lot of room to work with. So I feel like this is a really good size. Alright, I just ran out of welding wire, so I'm going to go run to the store, and I'm probably just going to finish it up in the dark. But I figured I'd get one last video in just to show like the concept of this turret mount and how it's going to work. So here's the turret right here, and here's the hole in the floor. So this, what I'll do is I'll goop all of this with a sealant, and I'll hammer it down as flat as possible. So I'll try to like use vice grips and maybe like a sledgehammer and try to like get that as flat as possible so there's not as much variance in the floor. And then I'll take my turret mount and then flop it over right into here. So that'll sit and it'll give me a nice surface to mount onto. And the heater has a gasket that'll cover this mounting flange, and then underneath it, like I said before, will be the sealant, so it'll create a good pass through, and then I can start wiring it up to my battery, as well as installing the thermostat, the temperature control, and putting in the air ducts. So this is my ducting material right here, and I'll probably just duct it up and then have it kind of like shoot right towards where I'm sleeping. So cool. Made a bunch of progress on the heater install last night, and I wanted to show you the plumbing for the gas supply before it all gets tucked up into the body. So I have, which first of all, I knew like first impression is like, what in the hillbilly tarnation is that? But that's just kind of the way that these heaters are, is because the fuel supply is a rigid line. These are a pulsing pump, so if you were to use like a rubber line, like just a regular fuel line, that's an extension cord. That's actually not even a fuel line, but if you were to use a rubber line, it would have some expansion to it, and so you need to use this rigid walled fuel line to hold the pulse of the fuel supply. But the way that you connect from a rigid fuel line to the nipple of like a fuel filter or the pump is through these connections here. So I know it just looks absurd, but it's such a small space. You got the inlet for the fuel supply, and then this transfers over, and then this is the fuel line right here, and then this goes into my fuel filter, which then comes over into the fuel pump, and then this goes to the supply of the heater. So I know it looks a little absurd, but that's just kind of the way it is, and you have to push the lines in all the way so that they abut and there's no void in between. So what I'm saying is, if there is the rigid fuel line and then a gap between the nipple of the next fitting, there'd be the ability for an air bubble to form. So here there is no break, and only have, like, if you were to cut this anywhere, cut it, you would always go into either the fitting of a connector or into the rigid fuel line somewhere. So before I took that up, I just wanted to show you that, and I had to go run over to Newton, a couple towns over, to go get some new tank straps. Turns out these bent pieces of metal cost $100, so awesome. But heater's looking awesome. I have it in there. I painted the turret and cured the paint, so this is a heat temperative paint, so you have to cook it into the oven, which, if you're in the state of California, I'm sure would cause cancer if you were to use that oven for food purposes. So keep that in mind if you're in California. And I have my intake and exhaust loosely plumbed up. This is the exhaust right here coming in, and then the intake as well, which I'm going to hide over on the transfer case skid plate. And one thing I've just noticed from using the Webasto kit from all the Chinese ones is just the quality of all of the fasteners. Like, all the bolts and clamps are all stainless, and it's just of like higher quality, thicker gauge. I definitely don't think it's worth like the additional $1,000 or something that this kit costs. But it is something to note that if you do go the Chinese unit route, that it might be worthwhile to go to a hardware store and get like slightly better components for mounting everything. Alright, I'm just finalizing the exhaust here. I've been running it all day and it runs great. It is a little bit noisy, so I'm going to put on this silencer right here. It's the flow-through style. In order to put this on, you just put the little drilled hole up, and then I'm going to weld mine in line. So I got a few different exhaust sections here. I got the original Webasto unit here, and then I have these couplings that I cut out from some of this old, this is from like a Chinese diesel heater or something like that. So I'm going to use that to adapt everything. So take my heater, hole up, come in, okay. So with it, I'm just going to give it a quick little tack weld. I like to come out with my wire and then just break it instead of having a pair of pliers. But Alright, cool. So the silencer is in, and I'm just going to finish it up. I do want to just throw out there that I don't stare at my welds when I make them. I close my eyes really tight, and then I just do little tack welds. I definitely don't do that when I'm doing anything more than a tack weld, and I definitely don't recommend it. It's just a really bad practice that I picked up from a mentor. I definitely want to throw out there, you should always wear your helmet when you're welding. But will you go blind from closing your eyes and making a few tack welds? No, you're not going to lose your vision. It's definitely not good for you. Probably in the state of California. But, so I'm going to do my brackets and then just finish it off. I got this little end piece right here, which goes at the very tip, purely for style points. So finish it up, and then I'll show you the final result. So I want this exhaust to be a little bit away from the frame, as it is right now. It's a little bit too close to the frame, so I find that it's probably going to rattle. So I have this little bracket right here that I just made. I'm going to weld that to the frame and then put the exhaust onto this. ahead and finished welding all those, and then I painted that section with a POR 15. I prepped everything, and then went ahead and just put down a layer of paint. I plan to do the rest of the frame, so I just wanted to get that section done tonight before I do the rest. But here's the final setup. I put on this little muffler tip for style points, and then put in the drain hole right here, so if there's any moisture in the system, it'll drain out, because that's a low point in the system. So these are all fully welded, and yeah, it's looking pretty nice, and I'm psyched on the audio. The decibels came down quite a lot with that silencer, and it looks really nice mounted there, so cool. I mean, for this space, I mean, this is going to take nothing to heat. I've noticed that putting it on the thermostat, it just cycles on and off freely, and yeah, keep on going with the winterization.